Conan, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of their women. That is good.
12 suppressed facts and stories of Conan the Barbarian. Conan the Barbarian has existed and will continue to exist for a long time. Conan was created by Robert E. Howard as a strong, intelligent, and skilled conqueror. Howard was a brilliant visionary and created an entirely new fictional era of history called the Hyborian Age. Although Howard's Conan was a hero of his time, various publications have since made him a man who's free of timelines. As a warrior, he's all about blood and bones, but he's also a born leader and skilled tactician. Belittling Conan simply as a barbarian goes against the respect he deserves. Conan puts his brain to good use when devising plans and strategies to further his objective of conquest and battle. He's not superhuman, but his martial arts skills and muscular body have the potential of defeating even the strongest of opponents. In this video, we will talk about the origin, genesis, development, future, and facts about this eccentric lover, wanderer, warrior, and king. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Number 1. Conception and Evolution of Conan the Cimmerian by Howard. In 1931, Robert E. Howard penned down a fantasy story called People of the Dark for the then famous pulp magazine Weird Tales. The story was primarily about reincarnation, but he introduced a character named Conan of the Reavers. Howard then went on to write The Phoenix on the Sword in 1932. It was in this tale that he built the foundations for Conan. Howard's Conan hailed from the fictional land called Cimmeria, where he turned from a poor young boy to an excellent warrior by the age of 15. Since the publication of The Phoenix on the Sword, there was no stopping Howard, and he wrote 18 stories about Conan. We won't be wrong in saying that what was started in 1931 as an experiment bore its fruits in 1932. Before creating Conan, Howard was working on Kull, whose stories and legends were ruling Weird Tales magazines and the lost city of Atlantis. One such story was By This Axe I Rule, with Kull as the protagonist. Although Weird Tales rejected it, Howard didn't want to discard his literary effort, so he rewrote it as The Phoenix on the Sword, and based Conan on the same lines as Kull. Both the characters shared an uncanny resemblance in terms of size, fighting styles, and physique. However, the newly written piece was more supernatural and Lovecraftian. Howard also added more women in the life of Conan, making him more playboyish than Kull. This is how Conan the Cimmerian was given birth and nurtured into a brutal fighting machine. It is interesting to note that Howard conceptualized and created Kull in 1929 and Conan in 1931, but the two heroes did not follow chronology on the big screen. Conan the Barbarian was released in 1982, much before Kull the Conqueror, which hit theaters in 1997. Number 2. Howard's Legacy. In 1936, Robert E. Howard committed suicide after his mother was diagnosed with tuberculosis. Before his unfortunate and sudden death, Howard had produced numerous tales about Conan, which had become a hit among the masses. His foundation helped Conan travel from magazines to bookshelves to the cinema and finally television and OTT media like Netflix. The magazine Fantasy Fan and Weird Tales continued to publish his works, and by now many authors were picking up Howard's unfinished narratives. They rewrote his Conan stories into novellas and novels. In the 50s, writers like Lynn Carter, Bjorn Nyberg, and L. Sprague de Camp penned down works like The Snout in the Dark and The Return of Conan. Later in the 60s, Lancer Books claimed the rights of publishing Conan in paperbacks, and they hired Frank Frazetta to do the covers of these books. The image of Conan with ripped muscles and a chiseled body with pumped-out veins came from Frazetta's imagination of Conan, and it exponentially accelerated the character's popularity. These artworks attracted crowds toward this hulking and handsome male. A few years ago, Frazetta's original Conan the Destroyer sold for $1.5 million, and Conan the Conqueror sold for $1 million. However, these paperback novels intensely magnify the personality of Conan that Howard had visualized. Conan was never really a hero that went on world-saving voyages or one who committed his life and body to the people. He was rather self-absorbed and did what he did for his own survival, growth, and rise to power. Yes, he performed heroic deeds in the process, but he primarily displayed traits of an anti-hero. This portrayal of Conan naturally had a ripple effect on the writers, and they created other characters who were violent, virtually tempted towards sex, and full of questionable virtues. Number 3. Conan Comes to Comics, Marvel Comics. The popularity of Conan, brought by Lancer Books and Ace Books, paved the way for Conan to walk into the world of Marvel Comics. In 1970, writer Roy Thomas asked the editor-in-chief Stan Lee about a new series based on Conan, and Stan Lee agreed. Thomas then collaborated with Barry Windsor Smith to produce the first issue named Conan the Barbarian #1 in October 1970. The success of this comic led to the title Savage Sword of Conan in 1974. However, Marvel Comics lost the publishing rights of Conan in 2003 to Dark Horse Comics. Dark Horse proceeded to publish Conan-based comics for the next 15 years until 2018, when Marvel Comics reclaimed the rights. On January 1st, 2019, Conan the Barbarian saw a reboot as a 12-issue anthology. Interestingly, this was followed by the reboot of Savage Sword of Conan. These stories established everything there was to know about Conan in an enjoyable comic book format, making him a household name, especially among teen and college-going readers. 2020 marked the 50th anniversary of Conan the Barbarian coming to Marvel Comics, and naturally, they released a celebratory one-shot epic edition called King Size Conan in the December of 2020. Marvel brought in Roy Thomas to work on this one. The specialty of these comics is that they have remained true to the personality and image of Conan. He's that same ruthless and violent force that doesn't think twice before killing someone and who is always ready to save the damsel in distress. Back in the 70s, few fans had concerns that the comics would dilute Conan's character to make him more child-friendly and socially acceptable, but to everyone's surprise, that didn't happen. Even today, Marvel Comics is making sure that they give us the Conan that we deserve.
Can you believe that? Huh? Can you
Number 4. Conan the Barbarian 1982 film. It seems like every milestone that Robert E. Howard's Wanderer achieved became a turning point in his legacy and popularity. After a long and exciting journey, Conan reached the cinemas as Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Mr. Universe seemed like the perfect match for Conan. Despite Marvel Comics being a major contributing factor behind the making of the movie, writer-director John Milius and writer Oliver Stone kept the story and characters grounded to Howard's original world, although Edward Summer and Marvel Comics' Roy Thomas are known to have written an uncredited first draft. The film is about Conan's revenge against Thulsa Doom, a savage warlord who killed his father and decapitated his mother. He grew up as a slave, but once he earned his freedom, he plotted against Thulsa Doom to avenge his parents.
You have come to me, my son.
For who now is your father if it is not me?
The making of this movie was a twisted affair, both cinematically and realistically. Arnie was the first choice as the lead, but his huge chest and arm muscles made it difficult for him to wield a sword properly, so he was asked to lose around 30 pounds. He was also given martial arts and horse riding training.
But you know, success can test one's mettle as surely as the strongest adversary.
The Muscle Man went through a lot during the production. In the scene where two dogs chase him, Milius used really fierce dogs who even attacked their trainer. So when we see Schwarzenegger running from the dogs, he is actually running for his life. In the crucifixion scene, Milius used a live vulture to bite Arnold's wounds, and later he bites off the neck of an actual dead vulture. Schwarzenegger also had to do most of his stunts because they couldn't find an appropriate body double given his Mr. Universe body. The man did an amazing job in the film, and it led him to bag great movies like Terminator and Predator. However, Arnold was only one of the many contributing factors behind the Barbarian's popular and critical success. Milius worked with Basil Poledouris to create a beautiful and engaging score. In an interview, Basil even revealed that the music is just one long and continuous cue from the first scene of the film to the scene with the Wheel of Pain. We can never be grateful enough to Howard for creating Conan and his world with a pioneering and marvelous imagination. 2 years after the film's release, Conan fans were treated with a sequel. Number 5. Conan the Destroyer 1984 film. Richard Fleischer directed the sequel to the first film, and he was brought in because the producers wanted a less violent film so that they could secure a PG rating instead of an R1. However, Conan's toned-down characterization, violence, and sexuality appealed to criticism. The viewers did not quite appreciate the idea, as it was far from what Conan resembled. In his autobiography, Total Recall, My Unbelievably True Life Story, Arnold mentions that Universal wanted a more family-friendly movie after the success of their 1982 release, E.T. He goes on to say that he and Fleischer objected to this, but they had to comply with Universal. However, by now, Arnie was a much experienced actor and showed off his acting skills apart from his biceps and naked chest, and did well in the sustained but less brutal action. The best part was probably the Glass Palace fight scene, and Arnie was more humorous in this one, with special mention to his drunk scene.
Excuse me. I must get up now.
Rock and roll star Grace Jones starred in this film as Zula and did most of her stunts. She even injured 2 stuntmen in a stick battle sequence. Conan the Destroyer was made more comic-like, and the credit goes to its writer Roy Thomas from Marvel Comics. Despite all its criticism, the film was appreciated by the younger audience, and this led to Conan's exploration of the animated world. Number 6. Conan and Cartoons. Conan's violent, cunning, and womanizing nature was defanged and made morally acceptable for the younger audience when the 65-episode animated television series Conan the Adventurer debuted. This was followed by Conan and the Young Warriors. In spite of being based on Howard's Conan, this version resembled nothing that Conan fans would have appreciated. This take was more child-friendly and tended to give moral lessons to its viewers. Howard and Marvel's Conans are cunning in nature and don't withhold from stealing to fulfill their purpose, but Conan the Adventurer refuses from stealing. Well, because it's bad. Of course, he will not visit brothels as he did in Marvel Comics.
There is nothing to fear, my lion brothers. I thank you for heeding my call.
This Conan would stand up for his friends and his righteous cause while divorcing his self-absorbed needs and ambitions. Clearly, this sort of picturization went against all that Conan the Barbarian stood for and all that made him a part of pop culture. The animated series had to be cancelled, but it brought Conan into a new arena, television, which led to his reshaping and evolution.
Destiny was to free the oppressed and become a king by his own hand. Conan.
Number 7. Conan the Adventurer 1997 live-action television series. Ralph Moeller stars as Conan in this television series. Thankfully, this time, it wasn't made for children. The story picks up where Arnold Schwarzenegger's Conan the Barbarian left, and the giant German bodybuilder wore the shoes of Arnie. However, this Conan was further unrecognizable in terms of his character, and to say the least, the Barbarian's character was assassinated in cold blood. He was crafted as a dumb-witted, all-muscle and no-brains Conan. It was an outrageously disheartening live-action series, and the most important reason was that its story borrowed more from the films than Howard's tales. The series came out when American television was taken by storm with series like Xena, Warrior Princess, and Hercules: The Legendary Journeys. Overall, this show adopted cinematography, style, and setting to ridiculous levels and resembled very little of the Cimmerian or Atlantean setting. Another diversion from the original story was Conan's visit to Cimmeria, and none of Howard's stories does Conan visit his homeland. Howard, in this live-action adaptation, happily visits Cimmeria to kill the evil Lord Hiss Azul and takes the reins for himself. But folks, all is not lost here. You'll well be able to see some great action sequences with a few CGI monsters and bountiful women in skimpy outfits, some of whom turn out to be femme fatales and the others damsels in distress. Number 8. Conan Rides the Dark Horse comics. As discussed earlier, Conan rights were acquired by Dark Horse Comics in 2003 until 2018. These 15 years led to entirely new developments for our mean wanderer. With its various issues, Dark Horse could sustain the popularity that Conan deserved. Many had feared that the change of publication would bring a dark age to Conan and people would forget him, but that was far from reality. It's important to note that after the end of publication from Ace Books and Lancer Books, comics were the only source of new Conan stories and fans were dependent on them. Until 2011, only 2 films based on Conan were released, and one of them had drifted far away from the source material. Dark Horse Comics kept the fire alive from 2004 to 2008 with its first anthology of 50 issues named Conan. Next in line were Conan the Cimmerian, Conan Road of Kings, Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Avenger, and Conan the Slayer, in addition to numerous one-shot comics. Dark Horse remained true to the source material written by Robert E. Howard, like The Phoenix on the Sword, The Frost Giant's Daughter, The Slithering Shadow, and so forth. The 24th issue of Conan became a part of a minor controversy when cover artist Tony Harris included a nude lady, which displeased many store owners. However, the 4,000 copies that were already printed were distributed by wrapping them in black plastic. Conan the Slayer was the final anthology by Dark Horse, but their success led to another event in the Conan timeline.
Stop starting off from now.
He's my property now.
Number 9. Conan the Barbarian 2011 film. The time and conditions were similar to 1982. Back then, Marvel Comics had created huge popularity for Conan and his world, and it led to producers to believe that they could monetize the opportunity. Similarly, Dark Horse Comics published some great anthologies and one-shots from 2003, and this created a similar atmosphere for Conan. Contemporary producers once again felt that they had a wondrous money-making opportunity, and the Jason Momoa star was given the green light. It was supposed to be a remake of the original film of 1982, but the plan was dropped, and this film became a reboot with a plot more grounded to Robert E. Howard's stories. The film revolves around the evil Kalar Zim, who wishes to acquire the Mask of Acheron. This legendary artifact will make him immortal and raise his wife from the dead, but will also unleash an ancient and diabolical force upon Earth. Conan and his team of champions will fight to stop him. Furthermore, Jason Momoa gives an action-packed performance that practically lifted his career and made him bag many great roles, in similarity to what happened with Arnold Schwarzenegger after his 1982 debut. The reboot was supposed to be titled simply Conan, then Conan 3D was given a thought, but the makers finally settled for the original title. However, the film fell on its face at the box office. Just before the credits roll in Conan the Destroyer of 1984, a much older Conan is shown sitting on a king's throne. Clearly a third Conan film starring Arnie was on the watch, but the sudden demise of this 2011 flick made producers skeptical about the new project. However, we'd love to hit the theaters in the post-pandemic world and enjoy a Conan movie in which the Austrian stallion would don his old look and give one last stand.
The Horde is at the walls.
Number 10. The wait will be over with Netflix. Well folks, all is not lost as Netflix is working with Frederick Malmberg and Mark Wheeler's Pathfinder Media. Nothing much is known about the project, but we know that it will be a live-action series and we're hoping that it will be nothing like the one that came out in 1997. Given Netflix's quality and dedication to films and series, we are confident that this new project will be every bit as dark, violent, sexy, and heroic as Robert E. Howard wanted his sword and sorcery legend to be. We only wish you were alive to see his life's work taking shape. What started as a pulp magazine character has now transformed into a globally popular icon under novels, comics, films, TV series, streaming platforms, and games. Did we tell you that Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft were contemporaries and in each other's good books? No, we mean literally in the books. In his story named The Shadow of Time, Lovecraft introduces a character named Cromya, who is described as a Cimmerian chieftain. And Cimmeria is Conan's homeland, while Crom is the god by whose name he swears. To know about the sequel, King Conan, you could check out our video titled King Conan: What's Going On with Conan's Sequel Explained.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.